for me, the idealization of true leadership is first and foremost doing the right thing. It's not just saying the right thing. It's deeds, not just words. It's words and deeds, but it's the deeds that matter because it's ultimately putting the action into practice. I think setting an example is incredibly key to that also, so that other people can see what you're doing and learn from that, just as you have from others before you.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we sit down with executive leaders to explore what leadership really means through the lens of their stories, their wins, their struggles, their vision, and their lessons along the way. I'm Ty Hammond, founder of One Mountain Leadership and creator of the True Leadership Approach, an awareness-based path that helps leaders shift their focus from what to do about their problems to how to grow from them. Whether you're just stepping into leadership or are well-seasoned and at the top of your game, your potential won't be realized following someone else's script, but you can draw insights from their stories and turn it into wisdom by putting it into practice in your own life. Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we explore the essence of leadership beyond tactics and performance by sitting down with executives to hear what matters most to them. I'm your host, Ty Hammond. Today's guest is Robert Gifford. Robert is an award-winning journalist, an executive leader shaping the future of digital news at CBS News 24/7, where he serves as vice president and managing editor. With over 2 decades in broadcast and streaming journalism, Robert has led coverage of the nation's most defining moments, from elections and impeachment trials to war reporting and major breaking news. Known for his editorial precision, creative leadership, and commitment to journalistic integrity, he has guided teams through rapid media transformation and record audience growth. A Princeton graduate, Robert continues to pioneer how trusted journalism thrives in a 24/7 streaming world. It's my pleasure to have Robert with me here today. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Thanks, Ty. It's great to be here.
So I always start here with this question. Every leader, every human being, of course, we all have a beginning, and who we are as leaders at work and in life starts taking shape long before we make it to any executive position of leadership. Who's someone from your early life or an early experience that really shaped the leader and the person that you are today?
It's a really good question, Ty. I think it's hard to pin it on one person, but it's a phalanx of people or persons. I think, and I don't know that you're going to get this answer from everybody. Certainly, maybe not in media, but it starts with summer camp for me, and a couple of stops along the way. One of the day camps I went to in my local town where I grew up, some of the counselors were sort of these high school kids who were, captains of the team and presidents of the class and the school, and very much, as my mom might say, BMOCs. And they were larger than life to me, at least at the time, and great personalities, great senses of humor, but also really great leaders, and did the right thing and acted the right way and set an example in everything they did, but also had fun doing it. And that was a really great start for me as I was coming up through that school system in that community to sort of try to emulate how they were. And then as I got older, I went to sleepaway camp, as many kids do. And I went to this great place up on Lake Champlain that really prioritized leadership in a way that I hadn't really encountered before. In fact, they didn't call counselors counselors. They still don't. They call them leaders. That's his intentional title. And I thought that was strange at first and interesting, but it really tried to instill in the campers, and it was an all boys camp, so it was young men leading young boys to become young men, right? And it was really a place about teaching leadership and passing it down. And I really took that to heart. I mean, I really learned from a lot of those older high school and college age young men, how to be a young adult, how to prepare for challenges in life, and how to be around other people and be around other men and boys, and create sort of a community around that. And I think that was an incredibly valuable experience, because I continued going to the camp. I became a leader myself, And my son is actually going to do his first year there this summer. So the cycle continues, and that is because I really believe that it was a great experience and a formative experience for me. And then as I went into college, I was always an athlete. I played sports. I played Division I sports, and which is very hyper competitive and very intense at the time, and a huge commitment. But one of the things that sort of carried me through into my adult life was that we had always had great leaders on our team. We were a very successful team. We won a lot. We had a lot of victories, in hard times too. But I learned from the captains. I also learned a lot from the guys who were upperclassmen who were not captains, who maybe didn't play as much, who practiced really hard, who worked really hard in the weight room, who cared a lot about their teammates. And I think being around young men like that through the progression of my adolescence into young adulthood really helped me learn about leadership in a way that had nothing to do with a job or even school to some degree. And it taught me about friendship and community as much as it did about leadership. And I think they're also very connected in many ways. And this idea of a community is really sticks with me. And I think it's something I've tried to absorb and utilize as an adult. And actually, I miss those days a lot. I mean, as one does when they get older, but I do because I think while I was having a lot of fun, I was absorbing a lot and learning a lot at the same time.
I really got that as you were giving all of these examples. That's what sort of really came out for me as this through line of all of those to some extent was a place for fun, right? For
Yeah.
play, even though it was competitive maybe and all that, but it's interesting to think about, what lessons of life and leadership, you know, come out through play in that regard. Of course, you have me, my kids are at an age too. Now we're thinking about what sleepaway camp. So I might need to do you want to give a shout out right now to what camp it is?
I will. It's called Camp Dudley. It's the oldest camp for boys in North America, and I can't recommend it highly enough. And they have a sister camp too for girls, also. So I can't recommend it high enough for anybody who has kids at that age who want to go to camp.
Well, I can tell you that I'll be looking at it soon. We're actively looking for good overnight camps, and that
Good.
sounds like a really positive experience. I'm curious to see, I typically find in these conversations that I find ways as we continue through the conversation that those essential fundamental experiences, ways that those have informed you as you've moved through your life and your career. Of course, in this podcast, we're exploring the essence of leadership, true leadership, and that's going to mean different things to different people. What does true leadership mean to you? What makes a true leader in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean it's like a true. Think about the word true in there, which I guess you can turn into truth. It's like it's your truth, right? For me, I think being a you know the idealization of true leadership is first and foremost doing the right thing. It's not just saying the right thing. It's deeds, not just words. It's words and deeds, but it's the deeds that matter because it's ultimately, you know, putting the action into practice. It's not just saying the thing and maybe not doing the thing or following through on the thing. I think that's an important thing. I think setting an example is incredibly key to that also, so that other people can see what you're doing and learn from that, just as you have from others before you. So there's a teaching aspect to true leadership, and it's a constant. It's not just you choose times or select times or have opportunities to teach. You're always teaching because if people are looking to you, they're clocking you, right? They're seeing how you're behaving in certain circumstances and certain situations, good, bad, or different, and that is a learning experience for anybody involved. It's also a learning experience for the person who is doing the deeds. And I think also thinking about the greater good, right? Being a leader isn't just taking all the credit or passing down all the work or delegating and all those other things that come with being a leader. It's also, putting the needs of others before you, maybe getting your hands a little bit dirty, or giving up things that might be the spoils of being in your position from time to time, so that others can experience them and enjoy them. And also sacrificing your time, sacrificing your energy, sacrificing, your headspace and bandwidth uh, in the right ways to help support your team and the people around you. And I think the last part about it that I think is probably just as important as sort of the function of doing the right thing is having humility. What I mean by that is like knowing you don't always know everything. You don't always have the right answer. You don't always can't always find the solution. Knowing when to admit that, knowing when to rely on the others around you, and being somewhat vulnerable in those situations. Obviously, you have to instill the confidence in your group and make them feel confident in you. But there are times you're just not going to know and not going to have that solution readily available. And that's part of the process. I think the process is also part of it, and being along for the journey with the group of people that you're leading. But a lot of it is not, a lot of it is organic. A lot of it is not something you could plot out in the morning and say, this is what I'm going to do today to be a leader. It is a constant, consistent practice that you have to do every day, and you have to evolve in it and get better at it and have setbacks and learn from the setbacks. And that's why I say the humility piece is so important, because when you do make a mistake, you do say the wrong thing, you do make the wrong decision, you can own up to that. You can improve the next time. You can talk it through or explain how it went wrong or why it went wrong. And you can seek solutions from the people around you, because it's not just you that has to come up with a solution all the time, nor should you. And that makes everybody better also anyway. And so I really think that piece, and that's not a piece I've always been strong at, to be very frank with you. That is that, and it's something I'm still, developing and working on every day. But I do think that last part is like, yeah, I'm not omnipotent, is fair, and also what people are looking at, especially today. I don't think in the modern environment of work or life that you can really, not admit that you don't know everything.
Yeah, well, I think it's absolutely essential. And I love bringing in to this conversation the awareness that, what we espouse as, what means true leadership to us, at least for me, I would say, does not mean by any means that I have reached that ideal or already gotten there. It's sort of like, as you say, that it's a practice. Boy, I certainly agree. Humility is right at the basis there. Something that's curious to me, I just want to acknowledge is that, part of what I'm hearing from you, especially in your acknowledgement of the first thing, which I hear a little bit of like showing, not telling, right? And that we are always, like when we're in a position of leadership or in the way that we are in the world, we're always teaching, regardless of whether we're doing that on purpose or not. And I just hear so much of those initial stories that you were talking about and the ways that you learned from those older boys, right? As you were going through, just really sensing that mentorship. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's often some of the ones who are the quieter ones, the ones who, don't give the rah-rah speech or aren't flashy or, the star of the team, that quietly do their job every day and show up and be a good person and be a good teammate and be a good human. That you can learn a lot from those people, maybe more so in some cases.
It's a powerful way to be, for sure. I'm curious if you can share about a time when you realized that your way of leading or being in the world was no longer meeting the demands of work and life, and you really needed to grow. Sometimes I'll call them like a turning point or a stepping stone.
These are good questions. It's another one, Ty. I would say, I would say the first one is probably when I started in this role, which is going to be 10 years now, believe it or not, coming up later this year, or around there. It's digital media, and so there's a constant evolution, change, testing, learning, failing, succeeding, and being willing to turn on a dime. I think when I first started in this role, we didn't have everything sanded down on the edges. Like we didn't have it all figured out. We were learning as we went and trying to build the plane as it flew and all those types of things. And I think what I learned is that you're going to have constant change in your team, because people come and they go, people grow, or people realize that they want to do something else. Um, and you have to evolve with the team that is around you. And so I think when I first started doing this, there was a lot of turnover. We were very new, but we weren't so new that we were startup. We were like we were going, but we didn't really know where we were going. And I think, trying to actually chart a path, that was a real huge challenge for me, because it's not just like, oh, we're gonna do the news and do TV. We have to figure out, like, is this the smartest way to do this? Are we utilizing our resources the best way? Are we treating our people the best and putting them in positions to succeed? And a lot of times the answer wasn't necessarily yes. And so we had to say to ourselves, okay, what can we change? And I think we changed some of our workflows and some of our programming and how we hired and what we did to develop people. And it was really a lot about the people and the personnel that were involved. It wasn't just like the product on the air. It was like, how are we making the product on the air behind the scenes? The sausage making needed to improve. And I think that was a huge moment. And then I think, as we got into somewhat of a groove, the pandemic hit. And that to me was in some ways a bigger challenge, because we had to make television in a very, very complicated environment. And also where the story was, you were part of the story in a way, where you had to figure out what you were doing, and when people were, distanced and at home and worried about the disease and worried about, the guidance from the government and from the company and everything else. And then when I really realized from that experience particularly, was that there are no rules. And that you sort of have to say to yourself, like, I don't there's no precedent for this. And so there's no rule book, there's no handbook. And you kind of have to say, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do this week? What's our goal for next month? And kind of make it up as you go along. So after spending a couple of years trying not to make it up as we went along and try to create a system, we had to then redo the system or come up with an alternative system, at least temporarily, to move forward. And so that's when you really wake up and you go, this is not going to be the same all the time, ever, and I think that was big.
So I love that. I love the full arc of that story, because it's like, it's so, what is the thing in there that, with that realization helps you realize that you're needing to let go of in order to be leading or be effective in this moment.
Yeah, I totally. And it's like, you have to be willing to throw the rules out or rewrite the rules or realize there maybe are no rules. And also get people to be on board with that and be comfortable with that aspect of it, which is not necessarily human nature.
Boy, I think it's I often talk about, like playing according to a set of rules when nobody else is playing the same game. It's
Yeah,
like, how do or like, how do you win an unwinnable game as you stop playing it? Or like, to some extent realize that, like you say, that there are no rules. I think that's one of the biggest things about, the nature of leadership. And, it's always been true, but to the extent that it's even more apparent now, just how complex, just how uncertain, just how ambiguous, just how like not possible it is to be sure that anything tomorrow will be the same as it is today. And that's requiring, I think, part of what I'm hearing is a different way of being in the world, one in which, you can be the best planner and be, the best performer, but that doesn't really cut it when there's no specific guidelines for what good performance even looks like.
right,
And all of that gets thrown out of the window.
right. Absolutely. 100%.
So, all of what you're talking about really is, requires growth. You were saying, of course, the humility, I think that's core to growing. What's been the most valuable investment that you've made in yourself for your own growth?
Whew. I'd say probably a couple things. One, very much like work related, and the other completely not. I would say the first is like, I constantly am a student, not just like, reading in on the news and paying attention to what's going on in the world and being curious as a journalist is supposed to do, but also constantly trying to teach myself new things. whether it's, incremental skills, stuff about the business, learning what other people are doing in my line of work, but in others too, that might be relevant. So I'm just constantly consuming, reading, watching all kinds of information, and I try to control my digital diet, 'cause to be healthy, but also like I feel like my day is not complete if I haven't, consumed enough information to not just related to what I have to do that day, but just stuff that's going to benefit me and the organization, I think, in the long run. Even if it's just like something that's like a sparkle of an idea or like a kernel of truth that I can utilize somewhere down the line. And also learning from people's mistakes and failures too, and seeing what hasn't worked. So I'm constantly educating myself, and I've been very open to saying I'm a student. And now maybe I'm not in school, but like I have to always be a student. So I spend a lot of time bettering myself that way. And then the second thing is I try to carve out as much time as I can to be away from it. And that was something that when I was coming up in journalism and media, that, there was almost like a badge of honor to be on all the time, to be available and willing to jump in and raise your hand. And there still is to a large degree in this business, right? Whenever news breaks, you're on it. Whenever duty calls, you're available. Answer the phone, respond to the text, jump into the office when there's a big story happening. I think I still do that when it's necessary, but I also carve out time to travel. I carve out time for exercise. I carve out a lot of time for my family, and those things I do with my family. Like we travel all over together. We spend time offlining and doing other things. And, it's also part of being a parent and a husband. You have to do that. But in this line of work, I think you really do. But also for any leader, you have to have separation. I have some of my best ideas when I'm like on a plane, or like I'm just like I'm like on a beach, frankly, or just doing nothing, or trying to read a book. Um, because you're not in it. And I think sometimes when you're in it and you're so close to it, and it's the hamster wheel, it's the barrage of the day to day, that you don't have time to separate and get that distance and get to 30,000 feet and say, like, what are we really doing here? Is this working? Is this not working? And also, just it's hard to actually just have ideas come to you if your brain is just, constantly on this linear path all day and all week. So I intentionally try to carve out time, and that's made me an early riser, for example. Like which I never was when I was younger. I was the opposite of that. But now I'm one of those people who gets up really early because I had to use it to read and exercise and be with my family, knowing that I need that time. And guess what? The people around me need that time, because if I don't do that, I'm probably not going to be at my best.
Hmm.
Uh, Mentally, physically, or whatever. And so it's good for everybody involved, but you have to make it happen. And I think I've learned that over the years. And you still can be a hero and jump in with a parachute when the news happens, and be involved when things get down and dirty. But if you do that constantly and there's no release to it, it's not healthy for anybody involved.
Part of what I'm hearing in there is, and I think of it as it's no that gives power to yes. If you say yes to everything, your yes doesn't mean much, right? It's actually in saying no. What do I say no to, right? When you say no to work, you're saying yes to your family, and that's where that really matters. Yeah. And it's in the things that, we choose not to do that gives power to the things that we choose to do. Boy, I can tell you, I think you're not alone. And I can definitely say, at least for myself as well, and my guess is for anybody who listens to this, that relationship with time and what's important and a prioritization is something that really that's at the forefront there.
Yeah.
So what's your vision for your leadership, your legacy, or the impact that you would like to have in the years ahead?
Um, wow. It's not a small question. I don't know. I hope this doesn't sound cliche, because I really don't want that to be the takeaway here. But I want to build something that is better off if I'm not here, or, for whatever reason, that will survive, not only survive if I'm gone or my team is gone on to something else, but it's positioned to grow and continue to be successful, not in stasis, not complacent, but leave it better than it was, so people can say, like this business is in great shape. This team is in great shape. we don't need to rebuild it or start over again. I think that, and that's important. And yeah, there's some selfishness in that, because you could say, well, I did that, but there's also some selflessness in that, to say like, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it or not. Then it's like it works itself out.
Yeah, and what's the I love that, and personally, I think there's a reason why certain things are cliche, and the thing is not whether it's cliche, it's the extent to which we sort of pass it off as cliche or actually own that, right? So I would say the vision to leave things better than you found it is absolutely incredibly powerful. My curiosity is, what's your sense of what that takes as a leader to leave things better than you found them?
Yeah, I think you've got to get everybody to be able to perform at a level that they can do it on their own, that they can be the next to step into the arena and be the leader, or to try new things and be challenged in different ways, that have some independence and autonomy, but also, to create a viable environment and business that can survive a very transformative era that we're in. There's so much disruption, not just in my line of work, there certainly is, but there is in the world, that you have to build a place that's nimble enough to evolve without you, or without the players in place. And that's not easy, because that's a mindset of like, are we comfortable with being uncomfortable all the time? Are we comfortable with change being inevitable and eternal? Because that's what it takes right now, and probably will more so in the age of AI and everything else that's happening in our universe. And I think that that's not easy to do, but you have to create a culture where people are comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Well, I keep on thinking that, there's been no point in human history where anything has actually ever been uncertain, but now it's really obvious that things are uncertain. So I couldn't agree with you more there.
We love
Where?
that term, uncertainty. We live on that here.
Oh yeah. Well, you're the news, so you actually, it's like in your day to day.
Yes, yes.
Pastor is now predicting what the news is going to be tomorrow, so it's sort of baked in there. Where are you feeling most tested yourself right now? What are the challenges stretching you the most in leadership and in life?
Where am I most tested? I think it is in what we're talking about. It is this ever changing, ever uncertainty. And it really does test you, because it's very hard to say this is the groove we're going to get into. On the one hand, yes, you can get your team and your business into a groove that sets it up for success, but you have to be willing to turn on a dime, and that's hard, not just for me individually, but for everyone around me, and then also to sort of help everybody along in that journey, because it's just not necessarily human nature to be comfortable with always pivoting and always changing, and things not being definitive. And that's a huge thing. But once you start doing it, there's actually a fun aspect. If you like a little bit of chaos and a little bit of like, what am I going to get? What cards am I going to get dealt today? It can be kind of fun sometimes.
Well, I say that's a fantastic attitude to take. One, in my experience, takes quite a bit of practice, being thrown into chaos before we find it to actually be fun. Okay, let's see what everything has to bring today. I certainly think that it's interesting to me. Humor and humility share, of course, the same root there. So I find that that could both of those things can really be helpful in that regard. Uh, this last question here is more of an invitation. Just wanted to offer you the time and the space to really offer whatever it is that's most in your mind and heart to share.
Um, I had a really interesting conversation with somebody when I was on a vacation. I was in overseas. I was in Europe. I met a business owner through my wife, and just a really brilliant person, a very interesting, unique person. And he kept saying to me, embrace contradictions. And I didn't really understand what he meant. And then he started talking about all these things, and I started learning more about him and what he was about and what he did. And you saw that his life was like, on the one hand, he did this, on the other hand, he did that. And the things couldn't be less aligned in terms of like how you would pin down a person and their personality and their interests. And I think the more I talk to him, the more I realize is like, yeah, we are all somewhat contradictory. It's just who humans are. I know we all kind of get pegged as a type, for better or worse, or we have certain interests that may align in certain ways, or we're wired certain ways. But I think this idea of like, you can be one thing but also another thing, and those two things can live in opposition within you, but also work well together and make you a better person. And being open to that and not scared of it is kind of cool. And so I've thought a lot more about contradictions in the last like 2 years since I met this person, and it goes a lot to what we were just talking about, and sort of embracing change and discomfort, embracing chaos, embracing the uncertain future, is like embrace the weirdness of things not making sense all the time, and not being able to. And I think that's also part of journalism, is like, why are stories interesting? Usually because they're not what you would expect or normal, or run of the mill things that happen day to day, right? That's what makes them news. And so but I think within a person, like, it's okay to be, into something that maybe you think, you might have been embarrassed about when you were younger, or whatever, and or just being open to it. I think that idea of contradictions is really something to pick at and kind of learn more from.
Well, I really love that, Robert. That query on contradictions. I so appreciate the wisdom that you've shared here today with me. I've really gotten so much out of it, and I am sure that whoever listens here is going to equally benefit from what you've shared. Thank you so much for being our guest on the True Leadership Podcast.
Thanks, Ty. Really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
That's it for this episode of the True Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by One Mountain Leadership, where we help leaders grow the capacity, confidence, and presence of true leadership through the True Leadership approach. To learn more about the approach, our offerings, our community, and how we can help you realize your potential in both leadership and in life, visit us at onemountainleadership.com.